August to welcome new President Gustavo Petro meant that there was cause to see what can be done that could really benefit all those who have suffered for so long and to change the situation. You're going to hear from our three defenders this evening about why, in the short time since the beginning of August, that is proving to be such a challenge and where support is needed so much. When we were there in August, we heard from so many defenders that the acute division in Colombia between those who support the peace process and those who do not support the peace process, who actively militated against it to persuade people to vote against it in the first place, and then have, really hindered its implementation ever since. That division is acute in the areas where we visited. And for example, in 2021, with the national strike and the protests on the streets, our lawyers were out there with the protesters, defending them actually on the streets, from trying to stop them being arrested and then trying to find them in police stations after they had been arrested. And what it characterized was a criminalization of protest and a criminalization of young people who were doing the protesting, the trade unionists who were doing the protesting, and people who found the economic situation too much for them to be able to survive protesting and getting arrested. So we heard a lot of testimonies about that situation. We also heard from the communities in the territories where the land has been taken over by, first of all, big landowners who propose to do something with the land and often do not, but they evict the people who have been working that land for decades and who generations have worked that land. And we also heard from those who've been affected by the multinational companies, and you'll hear a lot more about that this evening. We heard a lot about the conflict because in some areas we heard about the number of active armed groups that are attacking those people who defend human rights. So it is an acute situation. And in Cartagena, where Adil is a practicing lawyer defending the communities who are affected most by the conflict, affected most by the activities of multinational companies, you will hear that our team that visited Cartagena met with a lot of people and heard their stories. And that's what you're going to hear tonight, voices of the defenders from different parts of Colombia. We also heard about criminalization of judges as well in Cartagena. So judges, lawyers, human rights defenders in an acute situation of threat and attack. I'm so pleased that you are there with everyone here around this table and all of the people online. We're united together to defend human rights. And for this reason, thank you all for your participation and welcome to our speakers. So, our first speaker tonight is Margarita Ilamo, and Margarita is going to talk about the situation of AGIN in Cauca, with reference to the mega projects, talking about these global multinationals, and the land grabs and violence against women. So a big welcome, Margarita, and you are here with friends.
Muchas gracias. Buenas noches a todos y a todas. Pues es un orgullo estar aquí con ustedes. Gracias a Cabo, a ABC Colombia, por abrirnos las puertas. Gracias a nuestra guía, Mayora. Contarles en un poco tiempo, yo como mujer NASA, a veces nos extendemos mucho, porfa, alguien me troca para que no me extiende mucho. Porque la historia, el contexto es muy grande, es muy amplio, pero voy a ser puntual. Uno es que ya aquí la compañera ya mencionó, yo soy NASA del Cauca, Colombia, de la CIN. Pues el ASIN hace muchos años venimos haciendo un trabajo muy grande, muy importante, pero voy a enfatizarme más al trabajo que hacemos las mujeres dentro de la organización mixta. Hacemos el trabajo de las mujeres. Entonces, decirles que pues yo soy el resultado de todas esas luchas de las mujeres, las luchas del movimiento indígena, la lucha de muchas mujeres en Colombia, porque aquí me está diciendo que viene de los lados de Monte de María. Por allá distingo a varias mujeres en esos encuentros de mujeres, porque he trabajado más con mujeres después de que ancestralmente los líderes, los hombres, pues me dieron el espacio, pero las mujeres. Pero decirles que ha sido una lucha pues interna en la organización, es decir... ya.
Well, many thanks and good evening to all men and women here, everybody who's here. It's a real sense of pride for me to be here. I'd like to thank CAFOD and ABC, the Caravana, and our elder, our guide here, Louise, on the left. Thank you very much. I know I don't have very much time to speak, and as an Indigenous woman, I tend to talk quite a lot, so please feel free to stop me if I go on for too long. Our history, the context I have to talk about is very, very broad, but I will try to be, and deep-rooted, but I'll try to be brief. As has been said, I'm a woman, a NASA woman from the Cauca, from the ASIN organisation. The work of the ASIN is extremely important, but I'm going to emphasise, I'm going to speak as a woman in the name of the MIX, the multifarious organisation that I work with. So everything that I'm going to say is the result of struggles of women, of struggles of the indigenous movement, of the struggles of many, many, countless women. Indeed, Adil was telling me that he was originally from the Montes de Maria, and I know a lot of women from the Montes de Maria region. I've met with them and worked with them. Historically, the leaders were all men, but now women are taking on a very important leadership role, and this implies an internal struggle, a struggle within our organisations as well, in order to assert and defend our rights as women. Okay.
Bueno, en el norte del Cauca están los grupos armados, a pesar de que se hizo un acuerdo de paz, pues entonces ha aumentado el reclutamiento a niñas y niños, las amenazas a las mujeres líderes y las violencias, diferentes formas de violencia, pero en particular la violencia sexual a las mujeres, la estigmatización, la discriminación contra las mujeres. Pero también contarles yo, particularmente a raíz de todo ese trabajo del movimiento indígena, pero del movimiento de mujeres también dentro de la organización, siempre hemos hablado de un movimiento de mujeres. Y entonces, en el 2014 y 15 yo fui nombrada autoridad indígena en mi territorio. Y me tocó enfrentar varias situaciones, lo que estaba diciendo la compañera, el tema de la minería, el tema de reclutamiento y el tema de los megaproyectos, o sea, la minería, pero también las plantaciones, sobre todo de caña. Entonces, y las mujeres no tenemos tierra, a pesar de que hemos luchado por la tenencia de tierras, la tierra está a nombre de los compañeros. Entonces, las mujeres no contamos con tierra. Pero tuve varias amenazas por las Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia Y en ese entonces por la guerrilla de las FARC. En 2014 y 15 me amenazaron directamente las FARC. Uno porque estaban reclutando a niños y niñas como continúa, pero en ese entonces hablo de las antiguas FARC. Ese reclutamiento, entonces como autoridad me tocó que ir a rescatar a varios niños y niñas que se los llevaban y como autoridad y la familia lo buscaba, entonces yo llegaba, me iba a reclamar, pero fue muy duro encontrarme sobre todo en temas de la minería, en las afluentes de agua, donde ha llegado gente de otros territorios y enfrentarme, ¿no? Eso fue lo que me tocó, pero ahora continúo.
Eres un experto.
So in the northern Cauca, there's a proliferation of armed groups, of illegal armed groups, despite the signing of the peace accords. And there's been an increase in the levels of forced recruitment of boys and girls and threats against indigenous women and increased levels of violence, which takes many forms, but especially the form of sexual violence against women, of discrimination and stigmatisation. But because of all of the work, or I've been involved in all of the work of the Indigenous movement and the women's movement, indeed we've always, within the Indigenous movement, we women have always talked about the women's movement within our organisation. A bit of my personal history between 2014, 2015, I was elected, I was chosen as an authority by people, as a leader of my community. And as such, I faced many situations. As Sarah has said, the result of mining, of megaprojects, which is mining and also in particular in our region, agro-industry, the plantations of sugarcane. And also faced the terrible scourge of forced recruitment. And it's also in the context of the land struggles of the sugarcane. It's important to point out that women, we don't have land title. We don't have ownership of the land. The title of the land is in the hands of men. So we are actually landless. So in this context, as an Indigenous leader, I suffered several threats. I was threatened by the Defensores Unidos de Colombia, by the paramilitary organizations, and also by the FARC, by the guerrilla group of the FARC, direct threats from the FARC, because at that time, as now, there was a mass recruiting of children, of girls and boys. And I, as Indigenous authority, part of my role was to go to rescue them, to get them back. And this was a situation that was very hard. And in that context, when I was working to release young people who had been forcibly recruited, I was also able to see the terrible effects on the water sources of mining activities carried out by people who were from elsewhere.
En un territorio indígena, cuando llega el tema de la minería es muy complicado porque es la utilización directa de las mujeres. Yo siendo autoridad pude observar que llegan puros hombres a la región con las maquinarias y a extraer la riqueza que tiene el suelo, a dañar el suelo, a utilizar venenos. Y pude observar es que llegan solo hombres y allí llega la destrucción de hogares. Hubieron varias destrucciones de hogares y abandono de niños y niñas porque como las mujeres no hemos tenido bueno, nosotros somos ricas, nosotros no podemos decir es que somos pobres porque tenemos la tierra, el territorio, pero entonces llegan como a meternos en nuestras mentes que es la plata la que vale y el resto no sirve. Entonces las mujeres se dejaron a sus compañeros, abandonaron a sus hijos pues por irse con los mineros. Además los mineros no eran de la región, eran de otras regiones, de otros departamentos. Entonces, pero igual pasa con el narcotráfico, hay mucha fiesta, mejor dicho, es la destrucción de la familia y la destrucción de una organización. Entonces, como mujer que estaba yo al frente, me tocó que arriesgar mi vida para poder hablar por las mujeres, por la familia, para que no se destruyera la familia o para mantener la organización. Entonces, en eso tuve mucho apoyo de nuestras mujeres aliadas, mucha gente, porque también tuve la oportunidad de compartir mucho afuera, tuve la oportunidad de conocer otros departamentos en donde estaban destruyendo demasiado la tierra. Entonces, con eso, pues logramos frenar un poco, pero resultado de eso fue muchas amenazas.
So in the indigenous territories, the question of mining is really complex. As a woman, I have seen that when mining operations arrive, it's only men who come with their machinery, men who come and damage the soil, who poison the watercourses. I've seen with my own eyes the way that mining arrives with these men coming from outside, and how households are destroyed, and children have been left abandoned. Because we're rich, of course, we have land and we have territory. This is the basis of our richness, but with the arrival of mining, a different vision is imposed, the idea that money is more important than anything else. And so we did face a situation where women were at times abandoning their families and abandoning their children to go off with these men, the miners, who had come from outside. And a very similar thing happens with drugs traffickers as well, with drugs cultivation. These things lead to the destruction of families and lead to the destruction of social organisation, of community organisation. So as a woman leader, I risked my life to try to speak out in favour of the identity of women, of the importance of women and of the family, and to try to maintain the organisation, to try to protect the fundamental structure that is the family, that are our community ways of being. And I did this work with the support of many organisations, and I was lucky to have the opportunity to go beyond, to reach out beyond my community and to speak to people outside my community, to visit other departments in Colombia where similar things were happening to people's territory, where they were also experiencing similar processes. And together we were able to work, and not to stop the problem, but at least to mitigate it to an extent, and to be able to keep our fight alive in protection of our culture and our families.
Bueno, y para mí, ¿por qué defendía la tierra y que no quería que llegaran los mineros? Eso me lo enseñaron mis ancestros, mis abuelos, en donde la tierra no se debe extraer nada de minería, porque esa es la riqueza, esa es la espiritualidad de la madre tierra. Entonces, las mujeres tenemos mucha relación con la madre tierra. Si se destruye la madre tierra, pues se destruye a la mujer nasa. Entonces, por eso, desde la cosmovisión, nosotras tenemos mucha relación con la naturaleza, con las plantas. Con ella convivimos y ella es la que nos da la vida, nos da la fuerza. Entonces, por eso, pues fue nuestra lucha, y a mí me tocó enfrentar esa situación, como ya dije, con los señores, y a mí me ofrecieron plata, me ofrecieron un montón de plata para que los dejara trabajar, porque llegaron retroexcavadoras, todo el cargamento que ellos llevan para poder que yo me quedara callada, y como yo no acepté dinero ni nada, entonces se vinieron las amenazas. Y una de las protecciones muy grandes que me hice fue con la parte espiritual, con la parte cultural, los mayores y la solidaridad de mucha gente, mujeres y hombres. Esa parte nos sirvió. Entonces, yo miro que esa es la lucha que hemos hecho como mujeres indígenas o como movimiento indígena, pero desafortunadamente nos ha tocado a las mujeres, Entonces, por eso, desde la CIN hemos perdido muchas vidas de mujeres amenazadas, les ha tocado que irse del territorio, dejando la familia, y nos ha tocado enfrentar todo ese conflicto de amenaza, de persecución, y como no tenemos trabajo, entonces a veces también nos ha tocado es depender de los hombres. y para las mujeres indígenas o para cualquier mujer es muy difícil uno depender económicamente de los hombres. Entonces, por eso desde el tejido mujer siempre hacemos esas autovaloraciones, mirar de que se fortalezcan las huertas tradicionales, pero de nosotras, no de los otros.
I'm a bit slower than normal because I don't have a table, so my pad is running away from me. So for me, well, why have I dedicated myself to defending the land? Well, the defence of land is rooted in my relationship with my ancestors, with the elders who've always taught us that mining is anathema to our way of life, because the resources that they extract from the land, they are the wealth. They represent our wealth as an indigenous people, and the spirituality of Mother Earth. The relationship between indigenous communities and Mother Earth is very profound. And so if Mother Earth is damaged, then NASA women are damaged. It's a reciprocal relationship. That's just the way it is. We have a very intimate relationship with nature and with our plants. We cohabit in a territory and a mutual way of living, and it is Mother Earth that gives meaning to our lives. And so our struggle is to defend this relationship with Mother Earth. In my case, as a leader, as a female leader, these men, the mining interests, they offered me money so that I didn't speak out, but I refused it. And so when I refused the money, they had recourse to threats instead. But because of the importance of protection of the land and of the territory, the importance of protecting our spirituality, and also, as I said before, with the solidarity of many other people, I was able to keep going. We were able to keep going. So this is my vision really on the struggle of Indigenous women and the struggle of Indigenous communities. But I have to tell you that in many ways women bear the brunt of the effects of these outsiders coming into our lands. We are threatened. Many women have been forced off the lands, have been forced to abandon their families. We've had to deal with conflict, with threats, with persecution. And also there's an economic aspect here, because if we're left without work, then we as women often have had to, or without land as well, then we've come to have to depend financially on men. And that's very difficult, because this means that the social fabric, and so with the organisation I work with, Tejido Mujer, we have worked collectively in order to try to strengthen the possibilities of women to work, in order to protect our culture, for instance, through the cultivation of our gardens, of our market gardens, of our crops, which we have done according to a model where we have control of the lands that we're cultivating, rather than allowing others to have the land. So this is one of the important ways in which our organisation Tejido Mujer has been working to try to assert and protect the rights of Indigenous women.
Bueno, por último, pues yo sí quiero saludar a esta, para mí, eso es minga de abogados, para mí es muy importante. Yo saludo este espacio, que haya una red de abogados, yo diría que es minga de abogados, porque estamos luchando entre todos y todas por una justicia. Eso lo dijo usted, eso yo lo tengo en cuenta, que las movilizaciones en Colombia, las mingas que se hicieron el año pasado en mayo, o sea, eso fue por algo hay que luchar, y eso me da orgullo de que nosotras, las mujeres indígenas y el ASIN y el CRI en el Cauca, no estamos solos. Sabemos que hay redes estudiantiles de abogados, de jóvenes, de mujeres, pues en busca de una justicia social. Entonces, eso me alegra mucho de saber eso, que no, la lucha no es solo de nosotras. Entonces, pues para ver si algún día tenemos una justicia social y como y tenemos mucha esperanza en el caso de Colombia, pues con este nuevo gobierno, que se cumplan, que se implementen, que nos escuchan a los más desprotegidos, porque no podemos seguir con esas desigualdades en nuestro país. Entonces, para que sea una Colombia mejor. Muchas gracias.
And finally, I'm really pleased to know that this the caravan of lawyers, what I call a minga of lawyers, minga collective action, people coming together, exists. I welcome the fact. I salute the fact that this minga of lawyers exists, because we've all got the same objectives. We're all struggling for justice. And so the different mingas that were organised, the mass demonstrations and actions that were demonstrated, that we organised, that we were involved in May of last year, May of 2021, were for a cause. And so I'm proud of the work that we as Indigenous women, ASIN, the CRIC, the regional Indigenous organisation in the Cauca, I'm so pleased to know that we're not alone, that we're a part of a larger minga, that we have allies, we have friends among students, women, lawyers, young people. It's tremendously empowering to know that we're not alone and that we can work together in order to create and ensure social justice. We have a lot of hope with the new government, Petro government. We hope and we will work to ensure that it implements its policies, that it fulfills its promises that it has made, and that it will work with us to combat and to overcome the levels of inequality in the country, and that together we will be able to create a better Colombia. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Margarita. Thank you very much indeed. It's my pleasure now to introduce Lisette Trejos, who will speak about the militarization of territory, its impact on violence against Indigenous women, both from military and from violence generated internally in the communities. So thank you very much, Lisette. A big welcome from all of us, and I hope your cold gets better soon.
Un regalo inglés. Muchas gracias por la introducción, gracias a Margarita también por la presentación tan precisa de los contextos que está viviendo ahorita el norte del Cauca. Gracias a ustedes por el interés en estos temas, por acompañarnos esta noche. Y de acuerdo, es que estamos haciendo minga entre todas y todos para trabajar por nuestro país desde distintos lugares. Yo voy a contar un poco sobre una experiencia que empezamos en el 2018 y que actualizamos este año, que lo mencioné un poco hace 2 días, el protocolo de protección. Voy a entrar a detallar un poco de qué se trata este ejercicio.
Well, yes, thank you very much. The cold is a gift that I've received from the British. Many thanks for the presentation, for the introduction, Sarah, and many thanks, Margarita, also for such a clear and precise presentation of the situation in the north of Cauca. And thank you to all of you for being here. And yes, I echo what you said, that we're all part of a minga for Colombia. We're all contributing to the minga from different places and in different ways. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about an initiative that we started in 2018 and that we come to a certain conclusion in 2022. And this is the protection protocol that we have been working on. That's what I'm going to talk about principally.
Bueno, esto fue un ejercicio que nos permitió, en primer lugar, reconocer que los liderazgos de las mujeres van más allá de los cargos de toma de decisión. Es decir, que las mujeres que están trabajando dentro de la organización en aspectos económicos, administrando los recursos, las mujeres que están en las ollas comunitarias preparando también la comida que se sirve en las mingas, todos esos ejercicios que no es necesariamente portar la chonta de mando, también son liderazgos políticos de las mujeres. Entonces eso lo relacionamos mucho con cómo las mujeres hacen un ejercicio básico de cuidado dentro de la organización. un cuidado que hasta el momento no ha sido reconocido como un insumo político, ¿sí? No se ha valorado la importancia de cómo todo ese ejercicio también sostiene a la organización. Eso fue un primer punto de partida.
So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the nature of female leadership. It's not just a question of imparting orders. It's not just people who are in charge and telling people what to do. Leadership in organisations is also reflected in the work that women do in organisational aspects, in financial oversight, in economic management, in preparing the food that is required for these mass mingers to take place. All of these are actions which are necessary and which are a part of the leadership role. So there's not just a single narrow focus about what leadership means. Women lead in many different ways, and it's fundamental expression of the role that women play in caring, in making sure that an organisation is sustainable. Now, this is often not recognised as a political contribution, but it is. So that's the first point that I wanted to make.
Y también conversamos sobre qué tan diferente es tener una participación política como mujer indígena. Y ahí encontramos que si bien las mujeres como Margarita y otras tantas están incrementando los niveles de participación, no lo hacen en igualdad de condiciones. Un primer punto es que a la mayoría de las mujeres, cuando empiezan a hacer participación política, les preguntan ¿y quién va a cuidar a tus hijos mientras están en esto? A los hombres no les preguntan eso. Entonces ahí empezamos justamente a conversar sobre cuáles son esas diferencias también que impactan a las mujeres y que muchas veces hacen que lo piensen dos veces antes de ingresar a un cargo. Después de eso, empezamos a conversar un poco sobre la experiencia de las medidas de protección que han recibido algunas de estas lideresas por parte de la Unidad Nacional de Protección, y ya les voy a mencionar.
Okay, so when we start working with women, we talk about how difficult it is to participate in public life, participate politically as an Indigenous woman. So someone like Margarita participates, who is working to increase political participation of women. Women participate, but not in equal conditions. So the first thing that an Indigenous woman will be asked when she begins to be active in her community or active in public life is, well, who's going to look after the children? And that's not a question that a male is ever asked, that a man is ever asked. So there's the expectations and the questions that are asked of leaders are entirely different when you're a man and when you're a woman. And these questions often make women who are interested in leadership roles, who are assuming leadership roles, to think twice about the work that they are doing. So that was the first point that I wanted to make. The second thing that we do when we work with Indigenous women is we started talking to Indigenous female women leaders about their experiences of the protection measures, if threatened community leaders or human rights defenders. And we asked them about their experiences of the protection measures that are offered by the National Protection Unit, the State Protection Unit for Human Rights Defenders and community leaders. And the response is...
Bueno, ahí encontramos cuatro aspectos grandes. Todos muy ligados con la respuesta institucional que está basada en una lógica militarista, ¿cierto? Y esa ha sido la excusa, la seguridad, para llenar de más militares el departamento y poner en más riesgo la vida de las mujeres. Los dos primeros hallazgos con relación a estas medidas de protección fue, en primer lugar, que muchas mujeres sus liderazgos no eran reconocidos como tal. Entonces, cuando ellas llegaban a solicitar una medida de protección, no se consideraba que estaban en riesgo. De hecho, uno de los testimonios que recogimos acá es el de Margarita. Y varias compañeras coincidían en que creían que esas amenazas estaban ligadas con temas personales, pero no relacionados con el ejercicio político que ellas estaban haciendo. Entonces ahí nos encontramos un primer obstáculo para acceder. Y el segundo es que la mayoría de estos esquemas de protección están integrados por hombres que no son del territorio. Y eso genera desconfianzas, prevenciones, y algunas compañeras coincidían en que sentían un poco más de tranquilidad si estos hombres eran conocidos, referenciados, ojalá fueran indígenas, pero en su mayoría no. Y de entrada, un hombre armado que no es del territorio te va a generar desconfianza.
So the four main findings that we found, and all of these were linked to the military perspective of protection schemes. What we find is that the military focus of the authorities, who think that the way to protect people who are threatened, whose lives are threatened, is to bring in more men with weapons. What this actually does is increase the levels of militarization, and the presence of more men with more guns increases the risk that women face. And within this overall context, we uncovered a series of obstacles, the first of which is that many women leaders, threatened women leaders, were simply not recognised by the authorities as leaders. And so they were not considered to be at risk. And indeed, one of the testimonies that we gathered when we were doing this part of our research was the case of Margarita herself, when many people were saying that the threats that she has mentioned, because she wasn't a leader, had to be related to her personal life and were not political threats. So that's the first obstacle, the recognition that women leaders who are under threat are actually women leaders who are under threat. And then the second major finding we found is that when the protection by armed men is offered, it tends to be offered by armed men from outside the region, people who are not known, people who the communities don't trust necessarily, who the person who is receiving protection doesn't trust either, and even may fear. And so we found from the testimony that women were saying that they would have a lot more confidence if they knew the people who were being assigned to provide protection to them, and in particular, if they were indigenous men, if they were from their own community. So that was the second obstacle and response to that obstacle that we uncovered.
Entonces las mujeres no tenían posibilidades de participar en la selección del personal. Y mucho menos de que la referencia espiritual, los médicos tradicionales también hicieran parte de, en NASA hablan del cateo, ¿no? Que es como la participación en escoger qué tanta fuerza espiritual tiene una persona para participar en determinado cargo. Esto no existe dentro de las posibilidades que tiene la Unidad Nacional. Y eso deriva entonces en la tercera valoración de estas medidas, es que las mujeres veían que se quebraba la cotidianidad. Claro, llegaba alguien con quien vos nunca habías tratado y este hombre lo tenías que tener al lado todo el tiempo. Una compañera decía, este hombre hasta me decía cómo tenía que cargar la bolsa del mercado. Entonces, esas cosas también irritaban mucho a las mujeres. Y otro tema es que estos hombres no tienen una capacitación de género, ni mucho menos étnica. Y lo de género lo han identificado en actitudes machistas, comentarios, incluso han percibido algunas situaciones de acoso sexual hacia otras compañeras o temor de tener cerca a sus hijas cuando están estos hombres. Entonces ya vamos viendo un poco qué tan desacertadas son muchas veces las respuestas de la Unidad Nacional.
And this leads to the third major finding that we had. And this is that the women were saying that when they were recipients of protection measures, their daily life, their daily reality was ruptured. They had to be accompanied all the time by this man who came from outside. It was almost as if they were there that they always had to, that the men felt that they had to carry their shopping bags. You know, they'd been to market, and that the relationship was so close that that they had no space. The whole daily life was ruptured, and many of the women found this extremely irritating. And then the other aspect was that these men had no training in gender, and much less in sensibility about indigenous culture. So they were just had entirely inappropriate sets of values that were being imposed on the women as well. And in particular, the lack of gender training or gender awareness on the part of these male bodyguards was reflected in machismo, and indeed in cases of sexual abuse, and when mothers were worried or scared of having these men who were supposed to be providing protection anywhere close to their children, their female children.
Bueno, eran 5 en realidad barreras, la quinta y las 2 medidas que identificamos que han sido efectivas. Las respuestas tampoco eran coherentes con los contextos donde viven las mujeres. Entonces, por ejemplo, les entregan celulares en lugares donde no hay señal muchas veces, botones de pánico que tampoco funcionan adecuadamente. El tema de los chalecos antibalas también era como, yo no quepo en este chaleco. Muchas compañeras decían, mi forma no es esta, mis senos son grandes, mi cuerpo es grande. Entonces tampoco había una medida que tuviera presente la forma de los cuerpos. Y eso además se volvió una carga económica para las mujeres, el no tener muchas veces que sacar de su bolsillo para pagar la gasolina o para comprarle a los guardaespaldas. Entonces, son algunas de las cosas que resultaron. Y 2 temas, entre otros, que ya Margarita mencionó, que han sido muy efectivos, son, aparte de la medicina tradicional y la guardia indígena, las redes de solidaridad entre mujeres, el fortalecer las acciones para conversar estos temas, para cuidarse también entre ellas, para cuidar a los hijos de las otras mujeres, ha sido una gran ayuda entre ellas. Y finalmente, los recorridos territoriales, caminar el territorio. Eso es un ejercicio que se hace muy de la mano con la Guardia Indígena, poner vallas con los nombres de las mujeres asesinadas, con los nombres de la organización. Es un poco el lema de estamos aquí y no nos vamos a ir, no nos van a sacar. Eso es muy brevemente lo que resultó. Este documento lo pueden encontrar en la página de Codacop, lo pueden descargar y ahí hay mucha más información que les puede interesar. Muchas gracias.
After the
So don't.
after.
We also, the final sort of major finding, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of very briefly about the 2 responses to these findings that the women developed, is also that the measures were entirely out of context in which the women live. For instance, they'd be offered a cell phone in areas where there's no cell phone coverage, or they'd be given a panic button that doesn't work, or they'd be given bulletproof vests, which they had to put on, and that didn't fit their bodies. And they'd also find that often they'd end up being out of pocket, that they'd have to pay for the fuel for the vehicle that the bodyguard was driving them around in, or they'd even have to pay for food for the bodyguard because they didn't have the money to pay for that themselves. So there was a lack of, it was out of context, and also could even cost the women money. And in response, largely as Margarita has said, the women focused on questions of their own, of indigenous medicinal practices, and also on the indigenous guard. Those were the 2 fundamental responses that the indigenous women said, that we need to be very focused on our concept of healing and of traditional medicine, and on the indigenous guard. But also the importance, and this is something which Margarita explicitly mentioned, the real importance of networks between women, of getting together, of organising spaces in which they could talk about what was going on, about what was causing problems, about what they might be able to do about it, when they could find joint solutions to questions of childcare or other issues that were causing problems. And within this context, and this is linked to traditional medicine, the real importance of what they call walking the territory. And this is something which involved the accompaniment of the Indigenous Guard as well, walking through the territory, putting up signs where they named women who had been attacked, where they named women who had been murdered, a kind of a reassertion of their relationship with the territory. And a reaffirmation that this is where we're from and this is where we're going to stay, that this sort of physical population of our own territory was extremely important. So this is in summary the conclusions of the protocol, or the protocol that we produce. You'll be able to find it on the COP website. You can download it. You can have a look at it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Lise. Thank you very much. And now it is a pleasure, Adil. We've worked together for many years. My time in Cartagena every time has been very important in the work that we have done. So, as you know, Adil is a lawyer and a human rights defender. He's going to talk in particular about the Canal del Dique resistance and the impact on the communities in those territories. So, thank you very much, Adil.
Gracias, Sala. Muy buenas tardes. Complacido de estar acá. Está Zoe, que ya nos conocemos hace bastante tiempo. Luis, que está acá. Está Richard, mi amigo. Y está mi amigo aquí atrás. Y las únicas personas que no conocía son las hermanas colombianas. Pero que han repetido aquí lo que es el contexto del conflicto en Colombia. En estos 30 días que llevo en Europa, he venido haciendo un mapa sobre empresas, derechos humanos, conflicto armado y sus consecuencias. Y es lo que mis hermanas han plasmado con mucha claridad en este momento. Esa relación que existe entre el modelo económico, el modelo político y el conflicto armado.
So it's a real pleasure to be here. Good evening, everybody. I've known a lot of you for a long time. Louise, Sue, Richard, me, Sarah. Indeed, the only ones around this table that I don't know are my Colombian sisters who've just spoken. I hadn't met them before, but they have provided a really clear context of the characterization of the Colombian conflict. While I've been here in Europe, I've been sort of drawing a map showing the territory and locating on it areas where transnational companies operate and areas where the internal armed conflict is most severe. And my sisters here from Colombia have provided a very, very clear demonstration of the consequences of this geographical coincidence between where the coming together of the economic, the political, and the use of violence coincide. Is what it looks like.
Por eso tenemos una gran preocupación, porque es el modelo económico, el modelo de desarrollo, los modelos empresariales que llegan a nuestros territorios, que son ricos en minerales, ricos en recursos naturales, y en esos territorios donde lo que ha habido es paz y tranquilidad, cuando llega una multinacional, llega la pobreza, llega la miseria, llega el narcotráfico, llegan los actores armados y con ello todos los problemas que nunca antes habíamos visto. La miseria, el destierro, es decir, muchos modelos empresariales antes que llevar progreso, que llevar desarrollo a nuestros territorios, llevan problemas, como bien lo ha dicho la compañera Lisette y lo ha dicho la hermana Margarita. Eso es lo que representa el modelo de desarrollo que Occidente y que las grandes empresas canadienses, europeas, americanas llevan a nuestros pueblos.
So this is therefore why we are so concerned, because the economic model, the development model, the business model that comes to our country, they come to our country, a country with territories that are very, very resource rich, where previously communities lived in peace. And the transnational companies come and they bring with them misery, they bring with them poverty, they bring with them drugs trafficking, they bring with them armed actors. They bring all these range of problems. People are forced off their land. So the business model that is imposed on us doesn't produce wealth and development, but just causes problems. And as Lisette and as Margarita have said, this is what happens as a result of the investments that come to Colombia from Canada, from the United States and from Europe.
Entonces nosotros, las comunidades negras, las comunidades indígenas, de pescadores, campesinas, consideramos que las empresas transnacionales son el combustible del conflicto armado. No nos oponemos al desarrollo, pero cuando el desarrollo amenaza la paz territorial, tenemos que exigir derechos y las empresas no nos reconocen como sujeto de derecho. El canal del dique es un modelo de desconocer los derechos de las comunidades, de atentar contra la paz de las comunidades, de despojar el derecho que tienen las comunidades sobre el agua, sobre los ríos, sobre las ciénagas, sobre el territorio. Y de eso quiero hablar porque hoy se nos acusa de opositores del desarrollo. Y este es un proyecto que viene de varios gobiernos atrás, pero que continúa con nuestro gobierno y lo quieren sacar adelante poniendo en riesgo la naturaleza y el derecho que tienen las comunidades sobre su territorio y sobre sus recursos naturales.
So we, the black, the indigenous, the fisher, the peasant communities, our view is that what the transnationals are is a fuel that fuels the armed conflict. We don't see them as an agent of development, but as the bringers of all of these problems that have been described. And this is the precise case with the project of the Canal del Dique, which goes against the interests of, which is an attack on the communities, on their rights to water, on the health of the great wetlands and the rivers. And often we're told, because we're critical of the effects on the communities, that we're anti-development, but that's not the case. What we're against is a model of development that has these anti-human and anti-nature consequences. And this is a project that past governments have, the Canal del Dique project. It's a project that past governments have all supported, but it's also supported by the current government. And it is a project which is totally at odds with the rights of the communities, with the health and sustainability of our territory and of our natural resources.
Entonces, es un proyecto que se vende como la octava maravilla del mundo, un proyecto de restauración ambiental, un proyecto de desarrollo para todas las comunidades. Así se ha vendido el proyecto. Pero yo pregunto, si es un proyecto de restauración ambiental, si es un proyecto de inclusión económica, si es un proyecto que busca impulsar el desarrollo de toda una región y de las comunidades, ¿por qué ha sobornado a las comunidades en los procesos de consulta previa? ¿Por qué ha excluido a 30 comunidades del proceso de consulta previa? ¿Por qué no tiene licenciamiento ambiental? ¿Por qué todos los instrumentos ambientales están desactualizados? ¿Por qué en el proceso de licenciamiento ambiental han corrompido a la directora de parques naturales, que ha dicho que todo el agua y sedimento que va a caer a 3 parques naturales no van a impactar? ¿Por qué pretenden contratar ahora en medio de tantas irregularidades y corregir después si es un buen proyecto? ¿Por qué tantas irregularidades en medio de este proyecto si se supone que es un buen proyecto? ¿Por qué las comunidades no hacen parte del modelo de negocio de este proyecto? Es la pregunta que le hemos hecho al gobierno, pero no hay una respuesta.
So it's presented, it's sold, the project, the Canal del Dique project is sold as the eighth wonder of the world. It's going to bring environmental recuperation, it's going to recuperate damaged environment, it's going to provide development for all of the communities. But if I pose the questions that I've posed previously, if that is all true, then why have communities been pitched against one against the other? Why have communities been bought off have been corrupted, been paid in order to support them? Why have 30 communities been excluded from the consultation processes? Why are all the environmental impact studies out of date? How can it be that the director of the national parks in Colombia should be saying that there is no problem of sedimentation of the water courses and the wetlands, when it's absolutely apparent that there is sedimentation? Why is it necessary for there to be so many projects to recover or to recover from the damage that has already been caused by the project if the project is a success? These are questions that I ask, and when we pose these questions to the government, we get no answer to the questions that we pose.
Este proyecto viola el derecho que tienen las comunidades sobre su territorio, el derecho al agua, el derecho a la autonomía, el derecho al trabajo, el derecho a la cultura, el derecho al medio ambiente, porque todo eso va a ser alterado. Y si es importante, ¿por qué no garantizan esos derechos? Sin embargo, como hemos exigido esos derechos, el derecho que tienen las víctimas del conflicto a encontrar sus muertos, porque ahí en ese canal, los dos bloques de autodefensa que actuaban en esa región depositaron más de casi 10.000 cadáveres al río, y en asocio con la ruta del cimarronaje. La ruta del cimarronaje presentó una medida cautelar que he elaborado yo, y hoy consideran que Adil Meléndez y la ruta del cimarronaje y la alianza somos enemigos del desarrollo, porque hemos exigido justicia y porque hemos presentado 19 amparos constitucionales por el derecho a la consulta previa y el derecho a la participación ambiental. Así se nos ha considerado, especialmente a mí, por un ministro del gobierno.
So this project violates the rights of the people to our territory, the right to agua, to water, the rights to autonomy, the right to work, the right to a future, the right to a healthy environment. All of these are made vulnerable, are attacked by the project. And there's another right as well, which is the rights of victims of the conflict to be able to find the remains of their loved ones. The paramilitary organisations that were operating in the area deposited 10,000 bodies in these river sources, in these rivers and the wetlands. They were dumped there by the paramilitary organisation. That this project is also a barrier to the victims, their family members being able to recover them. And we, the Ruta Cimarronaje, which is one of the organisations I work with, and I, Adil Mendes, are characterised because we ask these questions, because we defend these rights of the communities. We are characterised because I've advanced myself as a lawyer, 19 amparo cases to assert the violation of constitutional rights of the territories. I presented 19 of these because of all of these actions, these public denunciations that we make, we are accused of being opponents of development.
Y todos los amparos que hemos presentado los hemos perdido, porque el gobierno anterior era un gobierno corrupto y sus abogados actuaban de mala fe, con fraude ante la justicia. Solo un amparo que presentamos en este gobierno suspendió el proyecto. Y suspendió el proyecto y el señor ministro ha sobornado con corrupción a la representante de la comunidad para que quitara la tutela. Tenemos el video donde ella manifiesta que el ministro la sobornó ofreciéndole arreglos de vía, arreglos de escuela y arreglos de salud. Y con eso ella ha quitado la tutela. Así es Colombia.
So we lost all 19 of these Amparo cases because the last government was corrupt. The lawyers were corrupt. They acted in bad faith. We've won one under this government, this current government, and the project was suspended. But the minister of the new government herself offered money, offered housing, offered health support to
A la representante de la comunidad.
to the representative of the community in order to withdraw their backing or to withdraw the Amparo case. We've got this as recorded testimony that the minister of the incoming government sought to buy off the representative of the community.
Y como yo me negué a firmar el desistimiento, quitar la tutela, el ministro dijo públicamente: mañana voy a los medios de comunicación y voy a hacerlos responsables de lo que pase con los recursos y con el proyecto. Eso ocurrió el 28 de septiembre. El 29 el ministro estaba responsabilizándome de los recursos del proyecto, poniendo mi vida en peligro. Un proyecto que tiene varias personas amenazadas. Yo estoy amenazado por el proyecto. Varios líderes están amenazados y otros desplazados por este megaproyecto de 780 millones de euros en el que tiene interés los trabajadores, la empresa SACIR. Ya trabajadores del gobierno se van a trabajar con SACIR. Estaban trabajando para SACIR en el gobierno del presidente Petro y en el gobierno del presidente Duque. Los promotores del proyecto.
And so because I refused to sign the papers that were required to withdraw the Amparo request, the tutela it's called, the Minister of Government, government minister said to me again under the Petro government, said that I will I will go on the TV and I will say that you're the person who's responsible for the overturning of this tutela. I refused to sign the papers on the 28th of September, and on the 29th she went and spoke out publicly saying that I would be responsible for the failure to progress of this project. And this put me at risk, and it's put people, members of the community and leaders of the community at risk as well. Because of the opposition that we have to the project. This is a project that is worth 800 million euros, and we have workers, we have people who are members of the past Duque government, and we have members of the current Petro government who work for the company, Sapil, the company in question, doing the work of this company.
Es decir, los promotores del proyecto, que eran trabajadores del gobierno, ya están pasando a SACIR, a la empresa SACIR, que sería la beneficiaria, la contratista del proyecto. Y los miembros del gobierno que trabajaban en el Ministerio del Interior en consulta previa han pasado a la Agencia Nacional, que eran los que promovían el proyecto. Pero más grave que todo esto es que el día 3, la noche del 3 de agosto, recibí un documento donde se cambiaba la agenda para licitar el proyecto. Se lo envié a un periodista y él descubrió que la persona que firmaba ese cambio de agenda, en la agenda se decía que ya el proyecto no se iba a licitar el día 4, sino el 5. La persona que firmaba la agenda ya no trabajaba con el gobierno de Colombia, con la Agencia Nacional de Infraestructura, sino que estaba trabajando para una empresa que tenía vínculos con SACIR, pero estaba firmando como si fuera del gobierno colombiano. Eso es corrupción. Y con esa decisión, cuando eso salió a la luz pública, renunció el presidente de la Agencia Nacional de Infraestructura y renunció la vicepresidencia de estructuración del el gobierno de Iván Duque. Por eso se suspendió el proyecto, porque se demostró que esta persona que cambió la fecha de licitación ya no trabajaba con el gobierno, estaba trabajando con una empresa, pero había firmado como si trabajara con el gobierno de Colombia.
And so the causes or the reasons for the suspension of the project was that just to explain a little bit more what I meant when I talked about people working for Safil. So with people who previously worked for the promoters of the project, people who worked for the Duque government, and now we've got cases of people who worked for the Petro government as well, and who've left the government and then gone to work for Safil, and that they're going to be beneficiaries of the project. We've got the person within the Ministry of the Interior who was responsible for overseeing the consultation process with the communities, also passed to work with Safil. And worse than that, and this is the basis of the suspension of the project. On the 3rd of August of this year, I received a document that showed that they were going to change the terms of the contract. And they were going to change the terms of the contract on the 4th, and we were able to prove that the person who signed it in the name of the National Infrastructure Agency, a government entity, actually did not work for the National Infrastructure Agency, but was a contractor, was an employee of Safil, but signed it as if they worked for the government. And this is absolutely unacceptable corruption. This led to the resignation of the coordinator of the agency, who was an official under the Duque government. And this is the reason, this blatant piece of corruption is the reason that the project was suspended.
Entonces, al demostrarse esa corrupción, se suspendió la agenda de licitación ese día. No pudieron licitar porque Daniel Coronel, el periodista, denunció. Pero ese mismo día firmaron la licitación por más de 800 millones de euros de la vía Buenaventura-Buga, que es tierra de las compañeras, por más de 800 millones de euros. Una empresa, Safil, cuestionada en Europa por acaparamiento de contrato, cuestionada en Colombia por incumplimiento de contrato, cuestionada en Panamá y vinculada a actos de corrupción. Esa es la empresa que le van a entregar todo el territorio de las comunidades negras en el Canal del Dique, donde el negocio no es la restauración. Hay zonas francas, hay gestión del agua, hay turismo y hay puertos. Todo eso, el negocio no es las esclusas, el negocio es los grandes negocios y zonas francas que hay alrededor de 115 kilómetros, que es el proyecto Canal del Dique.
Sorry, so what was suspended was what was altered was the tendering agenda. It wasn't that it wasn't the contract itself. It was the tendering process that was altered by the person who no longer worked for the agency, and the journalist in place for the Colombians here was Daniel Coronel. So it was a very high-profile journalist who was involved. But on the same day that the tendering agenda was suspended, the Buenaventura-Buga highway, which is a project that will run through the lands where my sisters here live, was approved to be continued by Safil. So a company which has been found guilty in Europe of malpractice, that has been found guilty of manipulation of contracts and all of these nefarious dealings that I've mentioned in Colombia, and that has been convicted of corruption in Panama, is the company that is still being granted these enormous contracts. It is the company that will get the profits. And this is the project of the Canal del Dique is just a part of a whole complex of projects that involve the free trade zone of Cartagena, sort of a free port area, that is involved in the privatization of water, and that is involved in mass tourism projects. This is the company which we've demonstrated these malpractices of, which is going to benefit from all of these contracts.
Y para terminar, quiero dejar constancia de algo que nos parece muy grave. El día 28 de septiembre se me cita a una reunión con el ministro y yo asisto a la reunión. Ahí se me pide que renuncie a la tutela, que desquite la tutela. Pedí al ministro que me dieran tiempo y manifestó que iría a los medios de comunicación a denunciarme y lo hizo. Pero sin embargo nos reunimos el día 4 de octubre y nosotros, la comunidad, pidió la presencia del defensor del pueblo y del SAR anticorrupción. Efectivamente nos citaron el 4 de octubre a las 4 de la tarde. Acudimos a las 4 de la tarde, pero el ministro se reunió a las 3 de la tarde hasta las 7:50 de la noche. El ministro, el SAR anticorrupción, el gobernador de Bolívar, el defensor del pueblo de Bolívar, un delegado de la Defensoría del Pueblo de Bogotá, 2 líderes comunitarios, la profesora, para darle un tinte de legalidad, y el abogado no le dejaron entrar. Casi 5 horas y nosotros no pudimos subir para darle legalidad a un documento viciado de corrupción porque hubo soborno. Y para eso se prestó el SAR anticorrupción y el defensor del pueblo.
Just to sort of round things up, I'm going to speak about something that was very serious. So on the 28th of September, I was invited to a meeting with the minister where he asked me to withdraw the tutela. I asked for time, but nevertheless, the next day they appeared on the television, denouncing me. But on the 4th of October, we arranged another meeting which was going to be attended by me, by the minister, by the Human Rights Ombudsman, and also by the Anti-Corruption SAR. And that meeting was to be held at 4 o'clock. But previous to that, the minister, the Anti-Corruption SAR, the governor of the Department of Bolivar, a representative of the Human Rights Ombudsman's office in the Department of Bolivar, a delegate from the Human Rights Ombudsman's office, national office in Bogotá, and a couple of local sort of teachers and local people met together in order to stitch up an agreement to give the appearance of legality to the project. And in that meeting, the lawyer who was representing the communities, me, I was barred. I wasn't allowed to participate in that meeting at all.
De manera que nuestras peticiones, que es el derecho al desarrollo, el derecho a corregir los errores, a las consultas previas, a la participación ambiental, a orientar el proyecto con las obras de mitigación, no tienen respuesta. No hemos escuchado respuesta de nuestras propuestas hechas al gobierno. Pero, como he venido a denunciar eso aquí a Europa, desde el alto gobierno se está diciendo que yo he venido a exponer, a decir cosas que no son del gobierno, y eso no es cierto. He pedido acompañamiento para la paz, pero también he pedido que he denunciado esos actos de corrupción, porque no vamos a permitir que en este gobierno, que es un gobierno más demócrata, existan funcionarios que vayan a hacer negocios con la naturaleza y negocios con los recursos naturales de nuestras comunidades. Y el ministro es un comerciante, porque lo ha demostrado en este proyecto. Muchas gracias.
So, everything that we've been asking for the right to participate in the plans for the development of our territory, for free, prior and informed consent, for a role or to play an active part in planning for land use, environmental land use, for mitigation of the damage that have already been caused. All of these demands, all of these requests that we've made at the government have received no answers at all. But here I am in Europe talking about this situation, and I am being accused by the Colombian government of coming to Europe and telling lies and defaming the government abroad. I've asked for accompaniment to provide me with protection. What I can't do is accept that there should be in this government, as members of this government, which is a more democratic government than we've had in the past in Colombia, that there should be corrupt people operating within it. The minister that I'm talking about is in it solely for his own commercial interests.
El ministro de Transporte.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Adil. Muchas gracias. And now it's time for questions. So please introduce yourself when you put your questions so we know who you are. And if you are in an organization, tell us about what your organization is. So who will start? Yes, please.
My name is Belisario Nieto. In 1994, I used to run for CAFOD the program in the Andes, and Colombia obviously was part of it. A question that about the presentation, this company, I am assuming because we are talking about euros, it's a European headquarters in Europe. Where is the headquarters of this company? And is there a case in which the European Parliament can be involved in these issues?
Esa empresa está ubicada en Madrid, España. SACIR Colombia tiene su casa matriz en España y tiene desde el año 2013-2015 operaciones en Colombia. Creo que se le puede exponer la situación al Parlamento Europeo. De hecho, estuve en Francia y hablé con la diputada Mathilde Peñot y con un senador de Lyon, donde he dejado constancia no solo del daño que causan estas empresas, sino otras multinacionales como Suez y Aguas de Barcelona. Pero ahí está ubicada en Madrid. He escuchado, no tengo constancia, que es una empresa de la cual la Casa Real tiene interés en ella. No hay constancia de eso.
Bien corrupta.
Sí, por favor.
So it is domiciled in Madrid, Spain. It's registered there, domiciled in Spain. It's been operating in Colombia since about 2007. I think it's something that we could talk about in the European Parliament. Indeed, in France, I spoke to a member of the Parliament, Martin, someone, and also to a senator, where I described the situation. I spoke about Stafil. I also spoke about a couple of other companies, one called Suez.
Canal del Suez, ¿no? Canal de Suez.
Suez, la multinacional Suez francesa.
Suez, it's French.
It's a French multinational, and also Aguas de Barcelona, which is the Barcelona water company. And I've been told about Stafil, though I don't have proof of this, that the royal family of Spain has got an economic interest in Stafil.
Thank you, Belisario.
Gracias, Belisario.
Any more questions, please?
Yo quería hacer una, bueno,
Yo no te conozco.
me presento. My name is Karma Clavelarcas. I am the coordinator of Colombian Caravanas since February this year.
Colombian.
Okay. Voy a hablar en español y si quieres. No, felicitar a Margarita y a Lisette por visibilizar toda la situación específica que viven las mujeres defensoras y activistas. Yo me defino también como defensora y fui parte de la iniciativa mesoamericana de defensoras, que es una iniciativa centroamericana y México. Y me gustó mucho lo que ustedes decían de que las redes salvan. Y esa es una frase que nosotras hemos destacado, la importancia de la alianza, de la colectividad, porque incluso cuando hay una defensora, un defensor amenazado, que a veces lo tenemos que sacar de la comunidad, a veces la comunidad queda en riesgo, ¿no? Cómo ese trabajo que ustedes hacen colectivo de recuperar la espiritualidad y los saberes es algo que ya hemos comprobado las mujeres que nos protege. Entonces yo quería como felicitar y reafirmar ese papel de lo colectivo.
Gracias.
But I'd just like to thank Margarita and Lisette for having cast light, for having described so clearly the specific situation in which they live and work. I too consider myself to be a human rights defender, a woman human rights defender. And indeed, I was a founding member of the Central American Initiative of Human Rights Defenders. And I just want to Iniciativa Centroamericana de Mesoamericana, perdón, sí, Mesoamericana de Defensores, a well-known network of human rights defenders, women human rights defenders. And I just want to confirm what you've said, or echo what you've said, that networks are so important, that they do save lives. Working in alliance, working collectively is so important, because often when a woman human rights defender has to leave their community, the community that they leave behind is still threatened, is under threat. And this focus on territory, on spirituality, we can confirm it does make a really important contribution to collective protection, even in cases where defenders have had to leave.
Margarita y Lisette, ¿me gustaría decir algo sobre lo que dijo Carmen?
Pues yo creo que, pues sí, igual, pero pues el tejido ha insistido mucho en fortalecer. Visitas como estas también permiten justamente visibilizar. Hace un tiempo, hace como 2 años, ¿cuánto estuvo Alicia acá en Madrid? Hace como 2 años estuvo una compañera que era guardia indígena. De hecho, ella hizo parte, ella fue esquema tuyo, ¿cierto? Alicia, y ella estuvo participando en temas de derechos humanos ahí creo que no sé si fue en Madrid o en Barcelona.
Puede ser.
Pero salir del territorio siempre va a ser la última opción para las mujeres indígenas, ¿no? Una vez se desespera y es como, pero salgan ya, porque mire lo que está pasando, y es muy, o sea, el nivel de arraigo que tiene una mujer indígena sobre su territorio es distinto. Entonces hay que seguir fortaleciendo estrategias de protección en el territorio, pero esto es también necesario y valioso, lo que acabas de mencionar. Gracias.
Yes, well, from Tejido Mujer, from the organisation, well, for us, this visit here is a part of the process of network building, and also raising the profile, trying to talk about the situation. I think a couple of years ago, one of our comrades from the Guardia Indígena actually did have to leave and settle, I think, in Madrid or in Barcelona, perhaps. But for us, I think especially for Indigenous women, the decision to leave your territory, because the sense of belonging, of rootedness in the territory is so profound, that it is particularly difficult. And the way that they suffer the loss of their contact with the territory and with their identity, which is so tied up with the land, is awful for them. It's a terrible experience being forced off their land. So therefore, protection of these measures that we take to protect the territory and to assert our territory and the relationship with the territory in our efforts to prevent and protect are so fundamentally important to us.
Sarah, I think we have some questions on the...
Hay una pregunta, ¿no?
Bueno, tenemos primero informar que tenemos...
Y presentarse.
¿Perdón?
¿Quién será que está preguntando?
Que te presentes.
Sí. Bueno, yo soy Sandra Dixon y voy a colocar unas preguntas que tenemos acá en el Facebook. Sobre todo, primero agradecer a los compañeros que se han conectado desde Londres, desde Colombia, desde Alemania, desde Málaga, España, desde Qatar.
Wow.
Alguien que está en el fútbol. Alguien que está viendo el fútbol.
Tenemos una pregunta de JM Sarasti que dice: quisiera saber cómo es la situación de los líderes sociales hoy, a más de 100 días del gobierno del presidente Petro. ¿Y quién había preguntado? JM Sarasti.
Sarastegui.
Sarastegui. Okay.
Perfecto.
M.
Perdón, soy un poco. I am Sandra Dixon, and I've got questions we've been following. I've got questions coming from the people who are following this event on Facebook. We've got people following it from London, from Colombia, from Germany, from Spain, and from Qatar, which is what led to the laughter. And I've got a question from J.L. Sarastegui, which is really just to ask about what is the situation of social leaders 100 days into the government of Petro.
Compañera.
Pues sabemos que con este gobierno alternativo él tiene muchas, ¿cómo se dice? Están las puertas abiertas, él tiene todo ese entusiasmo, pero solo con 100 días yo no podría decir que si no han hecho los otros que llevaban más de 200 años gobernando y pues este lleva y no 100 días, pues es imposible, pero sí tenemos mucha fe que pueda hacer mucho por los defensores. Pero aparte de eso, escuchando aquí al hermano, yo digo hay que seguir la lucha y hay que pronunciarnos porque estoy de acuerdo, no podemos seguir apoyando a la gente que tiene esas mañas, dicen en mi pueblo, esa corrupción ahí para que siga pues dañando la imagen, porque nosotros sí queremos que sea un gobierno transparente, que verle por la necesidad del pueblo colombiano. Entonces yo digo pues no podría yo decir mayor cosa, pero no sé tú, Lisset, porque yo no puedo decir él ha cumplido o no ha cumplido porque apenas está explorando.
Well, this new alternative government, we think it opens the doors to possibilities. It's very enthusiastic, but it is only 100 days when the other people who've been ruling our country have been doing it for over 200 years. So it's a little bit early to be able to give a final verdict. But I do have faith that he will, or hope at least faith, that he will work, that the government will work to in the benefit of human rights defenders. But listening to my comrade next to me, it's just really patent how important it is to keep struggling, because we don't want anybody who's got the kind of behaviour, the kind of pattern of behaviour that has been described, having anything to do with the government. We need transparent government that defends the interests of the country. So I feel that I can't really say much more than that. It's too early for me to be able to say, but maybe Ali or maybe Lisette have got something to add.
Lo que yo puedo decir es que tenemos un gran sueño, una gran esperanza. Es posible que haya cambiado muy poco en 100 días, pero tenemos la firma de la paz total que permite sentar a los 6 actores, los más de 100 grupos armados que hay en Colombia, que tienen dominio completo en 100 municipios, de los 300 donde operan. En los 6 conflictos que ha dicho la Cruz Roja Internacional que hay en Colombia. Es decir, en Colombia hay 6 conflictos, 100 grupos armados que operan en 300 municipios, pero que tienen 100 municipios contados. Eso no lo estoy diciendo yo, dijo el fiscal Giovanni Álvarez Santoyo el 30 de octubre del año pasado en San Jacinto, que el Estado colombiano, la fuerza pública no tenía control en 100 municipios. En medio de eso, una gran esperanza, la firma de la paz total con el 87% de los votos del Congreso. En medio de eso, una expectativa por parte de un gobierno progresista cuyo presidente estuvo en la guerrilla y sí sabe cómo poder promover la paz, cómo poder llegar a la paz. No ha mejorado porque hace una semana, hace 10 días, asesinaron también a un compañero en Tolu Viejo. Hay un panorama de conflictividad, pero también hay sobre la mesa la esperanza de la paz total, que es a la que debemos apostar y la que debemos apoyar. Pero los conflictos están allí, los grupos están, las empresas están, que son el combustible del conflicto en algunos casos, pero sí tenemos una expectativa y un sueño de paz que podría mejorar en este gobierno.
Well, we have a sense of hope, of hope for the future. Obviously, you can't achieve much in 100 days, but one of the things that the government has done is get approval for the project of the policy of paz total, of total peace, passed, approved by Congress, and this is an attempt to deal with the more over 100 to seek peace agreements with the more than 100 armed groups that operate in Colombia. And indeed, it was admitted by the government recently, by a government minister recently, that of the 300 municipalities in which illegal armed groups operate, and just in context, that's about a third of the municipalities of Colombia. There's about 1,000 municipalities in Colombia. So of the 300 municipalities in Colombia, 100 are under total control of illegal armed groups. This was admitted by the government. So the law, the Paz Total law has been passed, and so we've got expectations from that. That's a good thing to have done. And of course, it is a progressive government, and Petro is a former guerrilla. He does have the knowledge about how to achieve peace. But this expectation or this hope doesn't mean that things have changed rapidly. Just last week, there was a social leader was murdered in Tolo Viejo in the north. So there's hope, but the armed conflict continues. The armed groups have proliferated, are still present. The multinational companies which provide the fuel to the conflict are still operating in the country, but it's a progressive government. There is room to dream, and there is room for hope.
Thank you. You can, I'm going to say thank you to Sandra because you're monitoring the online. And I will say also, we've had a message from Holland and from Canada who are present as well. And for those of you who remember Judge Maria, she's sending a big hug to everyone, especially Adil. So that's really, really heartening to hear this as well. Un gran abrazo.
Yo se lo extiendo a las compañeras.
Yo quisiera, en ese llamado, creo que como comunidad internacional también tenemos un trabajo. Y creo que en este momento este gobierno, como decía Margarita, 200 años, ahorita en 100 días, no se puede hacer milagros en un país que sigue el conflicto. El conflicto está, no se ha ido a pesar de los acuerdos de paz. Y creo que como comunidad internacional una de las tareas es esa vigilancia, es estar pendiente, es ser solidarios, es acompañar las denuncias. Por eso como caravana ya nos hemos comprometido que en 2024 regresamos a la 8ª caravana. Vamos a presentar el informe de la 7ª caravana a inicios de este año y un poco es lo que hemos pedido también en las reuniones que hemos estado al gobierno de Reino Unido también, que vigile, que supervise los fondos que llegan para la paz. Y creo que es una de las tareas que nos toca como comunidad internacional de derechos humanos y también el rol que le toca a la comunidad de derechos humanos de Colombia, ¿no? Es decir, como lo decía Margarita y lo decía Lisette y Adil, tenemos que seguir diciendo las cosas, hay que denunciar la corrupción, hay que denunciar si hay impunidad y no hay acceso en la justicia, ¿no? Y bueno, creo que ese es un poco el mensaje. Sorry.
Don't say sorry.
I just wanted to say that I also think that as the international community we have a responsibility. As Margarita has said, 200 years against 100 days, how can you possibly make a balance in a country that is still immersed in, or that is still experiencing an armed conflict? I think that the role, therefore, of the international community to monitor how resources are spent, to monitor the situation, to be available in order to respond to situations of threat and to contribute to advancing good policies in the country is extremely important. For these reasons, we as the Caravana have made a commitment to return in 2024. We're just about to produce the report in the early new year, I think, of the mission that we had to Colombia earlier this year. And in our meetings that we've been having with the United Kingdom government, we've been saying the same, that they need to monitor what's going on with the peace process. They need to monitor the way the funds are being spent. So this is the responsibility of the international human rights community. But I'd like to say that it's also the responsibility of the Colombian human rights community. And as Lisette and Margarita and Adil have all said, it's very, very important, it's vitally important to continue monitoring and denouncing acts of corruption, working against impunity and continuing to argue for and to defend the principles of access to justice. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Good it's amazing the way that he started.
I'm going to ask Sandra if there's any more contributions coming in from
Sarah, there's a question.
And we have a question, yes, please.
Sí, era para saber cuánto tiempo les queda en Londres. Lo digo porque hay una organización, Advocates for Development, Abogados para el Desarrollo, que tomaron un caso en El Salvador, me acuerdo, de una minera, una empresa canadiense, que estaba contaminando toda la cuenca de los ríos del Salvador. Y esta organización ONG logró sacar la minera, la compañía de El Salvador, en 4 meses. Eso fue una cosa impresionante. Tenemos amigos en esta organización, Lisette, una nicaragüense abogada, es la directora que maneja ella les podría escuchar casos concretos como el del Canal del Dique. Y hay otras organizaciones que también basadas en Londres que hacen un monitoreo de empresas en relación a derechos humanos en Colombia, bueno, a nivel mundial, pero lo pueden hacer en Colombia. Te podía pasar los datos de estas organizaciones, 2 o 3 que creo que podrían ayudar concretamente en esta situación, sobre todo al Canal del Dique.
Hasta el día sábado estaremos acá. Podría compartir los datos y ya, en caso que no esté en el momento apropiado, podemos hacer una llamada.
Perfecto.
Es Lisette Roble, sí.
La conoces, ¿no?
Sí.
Sí,
De Robleta.
sí.
Pero no tengo su nueva dirección de email, entonces.
Ya.
Estaba con la sociedad de la conozco.
Sí, se cambió hace como, no sé, unos 4 meses o algo así. Pero te paso el teléfono.
Sí, gracias.
So I was just asking how long they're going to be in London, because I can put you in contact with, there's an organisation here called Advocates for Development, which took a case in El Salvador against a Canadian mining company, which was contaminating all of the rivers in El Salvador. And through their work, they were able to successfully get the company to leave the country within 4 months. So there's a Nicaraguan lawyer called Lisette who works there, and I can put you in contact with them, and they might well be able to help or work with you on the case of the Canal del Dique. And then there are other organisations that monitor the situation of business and human rights in Colombia and around the world, and a few others. And then there was a little sort of conversation about leaving soon, but you can share emails, share contacts, change of email.
Very good.
There is one more question. Hay una pregunta más. Es de Oscar Bororques. Es activista de derechos humanos y estudiante doctoral de la Universidad de St. Gallen en Suiza. Él dice que, un segundo. Él dice, actualmente me encuentro haciendo una investigación sobre los mecanismos internacionales para la protección de las comunidades indígenas y sus ecosistemas. Quisiera saber cómo podemos desde la academia fortalecer las redes de protección y cooperación de las comunidades indígenas, étnicas y campesinas en Colombia que se encuentran en riesgo. ¿Qué podría hacer mejor las Naciones Unidas para apoyar las comunidades con el resto de la comunidad internacional?
Empiecen las compañeras.
I didn't catch the idea, I'm afraid, but there's a PhD student in the,
Switzerland. In Switzerland.
yeah, in the university. I got where he was, but I didn't get the surname. In the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, who's doing research into international mechanisms for the protection of indigenous communities and ecosystems. He's asking what from the academic community could be done to work with to work in support of indigenous communities in their protection of the in their own protection and protection of the ecosystem, but also he asks as supplemental, what could the UN and other members of the international community do better than what they're doing now?
Bueno, pues yo diría que digo lo que esta semana he dicho en algunos lugares que nos han preguntado que los estudiantes, los profesionales, bueno, hay como mucho interés, eso es de agradecer que Colombia pues estemos en mira porque como dijo aquí la compañera, el conflicto continúa. Entonces, yo diría, ¿no? De que nos pueden ayudar, pues primero, pues como no es un trabajo individual, es un trabajo comunitario, es con las organizaciones que nos apoyan a nivel nacional, a nivel internacional. Yo diría, igual ustedes mismos son nuestros aliados donde se puede contactar a estos personajes que nos quieren ayudar y que para ayudar a visibilizar, considero yo que para eso está la comunidad internacional, para visibilizar todas esas afectaciones nacionales, internos a los pueblos étnicos. Y diga que eso es lo que hay que hacer y hay que resaltar ese apoyo. Y eso a mí me alegra cada vez más de que no estamos solas ni solos. Los afros, los campesinos no estamos solos, entonces estamos en una mira y dijeron en el territorio mío, eso que nos ofrecen a nivel nacional e internacional, al menos a las multinacionales, a los actores armados, a los narcotraficantes, nos sirve para cañar, que no estamos solo. Eso sirve para amenazar, para parar. Es decir, es que no estamos solos, tenemos en mira mucha gente. Entonces, porque a mí me ha tocado hacer eso, decir, no, como mujer no estoy sola. Tengo mucha gente que, mire, usted verá y se mete con uno. Sí.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just say what I've been saying all week to students and to professionals, to different people that we've met. First of all, I'm really pleased that Colombia is in people's minds, that people are thinking about Colombia, because as has been said, the armed conflict continues. We're still affected by this armed conflict, and it's a situation that requires a lot of action. So what can you do to help? Well, I would just reiterate really, or say that it's not a question of individual action, it's a question of community.
sheet, because you'll all get information about the party on Saturday. Please come. I know some of you already said you are coming. We'd like to see more of you. So thank you all very much tonight, and of course, thank you to Louise, thank you to Claudia and to Sandra, and thank you to Lisa, and to Margarita, and to Adil, and to James.
Yeah.
That's it. Mille grazie.